Welcome to another episode of the YXE Sports Podcast, live from Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar here in Saskatoon on what has just been an absolute scorcher of a day to end off June, and it's going to be like that all week. Ray Morrison. We're also live on the Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar Facebook page. We're on the YXE Sports Podcast Facebook page, and we're also on No YXE as well. Seems a little weird, Ray Morrison, to be talking about hockey in the Stanley Cup Finals with the fact that it is 36 degrees outside. But that's exactly what we have in front of us. Your Montreal Canadiens.
Yep.
And basically the Tampa Bay Lightning, who I think everybody else is probably cheering for. Unless you're a Canadiens fan, of course. That's the Stanley Cup Final. So the first time ever those two teams have met in the Stanley Cup Final. Of course, Tampa Bay had a 1-0 win in Game 7 over New York on Friday. I didn't get to see any of that game. I was camping all weekend, so I'm a little bit crisp on parts of my body. I'm not sure if you saw that Tampa Bay New York game, but and then obviously you had Montreal beat Vegas last week. So Tampa Bay, Montreal, Game 1 tonight. If you're watching the live stream, you can see the game on behind us on the TVs. But give us a scouting report on the Stanley Cup Final for 2021.
Well, it is interesting because there was a private jet that flew Yoel Armia down to Tampa Bay. I don't know if that was yesterday or this morning, but it flew Armia down. Of course, he's been out in COVID protocol. And one of the things about Yoel Armia for the Montreal Canadiens is he's one of the best penalty killers that the Canadiens have. The Montreal Canadiens are 30 for 30 on their last 30 shorthanded situations. They have not allowed a power play goal, which is pretty remarkable. And Yoel Armia has a couple of shorthanded goals in that time frame, or at least since the playoffs started for the Montreal Canadiens. So that is big on the penalty kill for sure, because we know that Tampa Bay, with that front line that they have, they are deep. I think their power play is running at about 37%. So that's good news to have Armia back in the lineup here for the Montreal Canadiens for sure. And Weaver is back after the hit from Scheifele. He was in the pregame warm-up, and like Matt mentioned, as this is our drop time, we're just kind of keeping an eye on who might be part of the starting 18 as far as skaters go. But both Weaver and Armia took the morning or the pregame skate here. So that's interesting. The question is, how big of a role will the veterans play, I think, for the Montreal Canadiens? And that's one of the things, you take a look at Stahl and you take a look at Perry. Stahl won a cup with the Carolina Hurricanes in 2006, Perry with the Ducks in 2007. So they have waited a long time for this opportunity to get back to a Stanley Cup final. And as we saw with your Toronto Maple Leafs, a guy like Jason Spezza, these guys, they play a big role and can be difference makers in series like this. So the Tampa Bay Lightning, they're the defending Cup champions. They are favored in this series. There's no question about it. But, Montreal has proven time and time again that they are up for a battle. We'll see if Dominic Ducharme, he's expected to return Friday from his COVID protocol. So he might be back behind the bench on Friday, but Luke Richardson's done a good job. He's just, and I know they've been in conversation at that Montreal bench with Ducharme, but Richardson's done what Ducharme has done. You rolled the lines, right? Your first line guys get 16 minutes. Your fourth line guys get 12 minutes, and you just roll the fresh legs and hope for the best.
Brian on the Facebook live stream says, "Hey Ray, so you have a fan in Brian," and then he also asks who your picks are tonight, and obviously you're going to pick Montreal because you're a Canadiens fan. I'm going to pick the Tampa Bay Lightning just because I want to be different and I just don't want to see the Canadiens win, basically. Is what it boils down to.
You know what? Like we talked about, Tampa Bay, they are lethal. Yeah. I mean, they're not, you don't make it to back-to-back Stanley Cup finals by accident. So,
and of course, Tampa Bay has Luke Schenn, who hails from Saskatoon. He's a Saskatoon product. So he has an opportunity to win his second straight Stanley Cup. He was on the Tampa Bay Lightning last year when they won in the bubble. And John Cooper actually said something interesting about Schenn. He's technically their seventh defenseman. So if there's an injury, a guy gets banged up or whatever, he'll play. But more often than not, you will be watching from the press box. But John Cooper was just raving about how well Luke Schenn handles that situation.
Oh, for sure.
There was actually a video of him getting in some extra conditioning after the morning skate today, and it was just Luke Shen out on the ice with a couple of coaches, and it sounds like he's done a fantastic job to keep himself in game shape in case they call on him. So there is an opportunity for a Saskatoon product to win a Stanley Cup for the second year in a row. Patrick Maroon has an opportunity to win the Stanley Cup for the third year in a row, which is unprecedented in NHL. How about that, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's
plays in St. Louis when they won in 2019, and then he signed in Tampa Bay. They won last year, and then he re-upped in Tampa Bay. The other thing that we can't ignore is going to be the goaltending duel, right? They say defense wins championships. Well, you got Carey Price going up against Andrei Vasilevsky, so that's going to be one heck of a matchup as well.
Yeah, and I can't remember what the numbers were, but just sensational goals against averages for both of these goaltenders. I think Vasilevsky's up around 1.97, and for Carey Price, I think he's at 2.03 or 2.07 or somewhere in there in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So that is what it comes down to, right? And especially if you're Montreal, you need that good goaltending because you don't have the firepower that Tampa Bay does. So that's where they will talk about rolling the lines. But defensively, it's funny, Montreal, they started the regular season. Remember how mean Romanov was to start the year, and they had Weber, and they had some really good players. And then that defensive sort of character kind of disappeared for a little while in the regular season, but now it is back. It is back big time. And I know a few weeks ago I was talking about Jeff Petrie, how every time I turned on the TV, there seemed to be a miscue. But I was just a frustrated Canadiens fan talking. But
right.
One of the things about Petrie, though, he has been so good in this series so far, or in the last series, to get this team to the Stanley Cup final. He was so good against Vegas. So that's, it's interesting. That supporting cast around these goaltenders. You get down, and we've seen a lot of teams do this, but, so many guys get down and block shots and make things happen and, goal-saving dives and that sort of thing. And these goaltenders are really counting on that. It is all hands on deck. And the intensity that you play with in the offensive zone to generate offense, you got to play with that intensity, even if you're a forward, to come back and sometimes make a game-saving play. And we've seen that a few times here in the postseason.
I think so. Game 1 is obviously tonight.
Yep.
And I think, what did they say? Game 7 was going to be July 11th or something like that, if it were to get that far. So a Stanley Cup champion for 2020-2021 will be crowned over the course of the next week.
So there's a couple of things to keep an eye on here. So, of course, Montreal, their fan capacity has been limited to 3,500.
Yep. And they have 35,000 outside. But anyways.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not like they're enforcing too many rules outside of the party is. But it'll be interesting to see what the Quebec government does come Friday. Is there going to be an announcement this week that for Game 3 on Friday that maybe more fans might get into the building? Our Saskatchewan numbers today were phenomenal on the COVID front, so that's good. But the other thing, too, is they're talking about Game 3, that return. That could be the game where Dominic Ducharme comes back to be behind the bench for the Montreal Canadiens after this COVID protocol. So, between that and playing at home, if some way, somehow, Montreal can get out of there with the split, that's exactly what they're looking for tonight and Wednesday night.
It's going to be one heck of a series, that's for sure. Moving to some more local news, the Saskatchewan Roughriders. A couple of news and notes from the Riders today. Of course, they've signed quarterback Paxton Lynch. You might have heard of him because he is a former first-round draft pick in the National Football League. He spent a few seasons with my Denver Broncos. That just, let's be honest, he underachieved there. Has a cannon of an arm.
What? A Broncos quarterback underachieving?
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird, right? But he was a first-round draft pick back in 2016, I believe. So he's now a member of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. All of a sudden, that quarterback room is filled up with a couple of different quarterbacks on that roster. But also the big news was Canadian offensive lineman Brendan Labatt has announced that he will be sitting out the 2021 Canadian Football League season. Jeremy O'Day, general manager of the Riders, was adamant to say that this isn't a retirement. Brendan Labatt just needs to focus on a few other things over the course of 2021. So he is sitting out the season, and that kind of throws a little bit of a curveball towards the Saskatchewan Roughriders and their offensive line depth for this season.
Well, Cody Fajardo made a good point, saying, it's also what a guy like Brendan Labatt does in a room, a 34-year-old, right? And you're missing that. That's going to be missed. And he was quick to point that out. I think in 2019, Brendan Labatt only played 6 games due to injury that season as well, the last time that the Roughriders were on the field at the Canadian Football League. So that is a bit of a blow to the Saskatchewan Roughriders from a leadership standpoint. But again, in this league, how many times have we seen great young offensive linemen step up in their first or second year and just do a terrific job? So maybe the Roughriders will find somebody in his spot that can help keep Cody Fajardo, upright. But the other thing too is with this coaching staff, they will pattern an offensive scheme that lends itself not only to a guy like Cody Fajardo's skill set, but also what they have in depth on an offensive line.
Right. We saw last week that the University of Saskatchewan Huskies football team announced their schedule for 2021, and I think it was actually Tuesday morning that the rest of the Husky Athletics did announce their schedule, but we do have the schedules for Husky men's and women's hockey, basketball, and volleyball, which means we're one step closer to seeing all of our university teams, Ray, back in action. So that means that we're one step closer to having Merlis Belcher Place packed and also the PAC packed as well. So the men's and women's hockey team will kick off the season with a home and home with Regina. So those are always great games to be a part of, right? That rivalry, that 2-hour rivalry, and they do the home and home. So Friday night they'll play in Regina. Saturday night they'll play at home, or however it works there. So that'll be interesting.
Who's at home Friday? Do you know? Is it the men?
I think the men's are at home on Friday, and the women's are at home on the Saturday. Yeah. Okay. So they'll flip-flop there. Men's basketball will kick off the season in Brandon, October 29th. Both the men's and women's team will be out there to kick off the season against the Brandon Bobcats. Great college town, by the way. And volleyball will be kicking off the season against the Brandon Bobcats as well on November 5th and 6th. That game is also in Brandon. So we're one step closer to having Merlis Belcher Place packed. And like I said, one step closer to having the PAC have fans back in attendance as well. So that's great news. We talked about it last week with the football schedule, but that's great news for these universities to be able to have, and the student athletes and the coaches and just everybody involved to have, their sports.
Well, I know we've touched on this in the past, but you think about, those football players, and that for a time it looked like a decision was going to be made where they were going to lose a year of eligibility. Just absolutely heartbreaking. I mean, even you take a look at the WHL, and it was good that they got into the bubble for the hub or for the Western Hockey League, and they did get to play some hockey, but it just isn't the same. So, these student athletes are going to be itching when, as Matt talked about, October, the court and the ice sports get going. In the middle of September, when football starts, hopefully these numbers keep going down, more vaccinations get out, and we're ready to, not only return to play, but return to play with fans in the stands, because it makes such a difference. And of course, the University of Saskatchewan, they sell more garb than any other university, and there's just nothing like being at Griffith Stadium on a Friday night when Sweet Caroline is ringing out.
Exactly.
All the students are back. It's such an exciting time. So I am so looking forward to that after the year that it's been.
And it sounds like there's going to be some students that are returning to campus for in-person learning this fall as well. So that'll just add to the atmosphere of all university sports. Of course, we are live at Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar, as we are every single Monday night. And of course, throughout the course of the NHL playoffs, they've been having drink specials. Well, hey, you have at least 4 more games to come down and take advantage of that. And potentially as many as 7 games to come on down and take advantage of that. And also the Canadian Elite Basketball League is tipped off. So every road game that the Saskatchewan Rattlers play, you can come on down to Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar and see the Rattlers take on whoever they're playing when they're on the road right here at Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar in Saskatoon on the corner of Circle and Idlewild. If you're looking for something great to do near Saskatoon, you want to get out of the city and bask in Saskatchewan nature, you can take the family or friend out to the Petrovka Orchard. They have a great cafe that serves homemade food, a beautiful store full of gourmet apple and other local products, and a large variety of ice cream treats. After you fill your belly, you can take a walk to the riverfront beach and enjoy the most beautiful walking trails around the apple orchard. It is only 40 minutes north of Saskatoon, right on Highway 12 at the base of the Petrovka Bridge. They're open daily from 10 to 6. The cafe is closed on Wednesdays. You can check out their website for more info at petrovkaorchard.com. Speaking of the Canadian Elite Basketball League, like I said, the Saskatchewan Rattlers tipped off last week. They lost their season opener 92-74. They're in action tonight as well. And then their first home game is going to be July the 4th. Their second home game, July 12th, which is a day after restrictions are going to be lifted in Saskatoon, or in Saskatchewan rather. So it sounds as if there's going to be fans in the stands for that July 12th game. And that's another great summer activity that you can do. Of course, the Rattlers and the Canadian Elite Basketball League, their first year as a league was in 2019. You didn't know how they were going to be affected by COVID in 2020. They ended up doing a bubble playoff style tournament in Ontario. So it's great to see that, not a startup league, but, a league in its first few years trying to gain some steam and some momentum, was able to make it through 2020. And they're getting back to a more normal return here in 2021.
And I think this year, the championship weekend, if I'm not mistaken, is in Edmonton.
Yes, because it was supposed to be last year, and then they had to move it to Ontario.
So that'll be good if we keep on the track of vaccines and whatnot. If we can figure out a way to get fans into the stands across Western Canada for this league, it'll be great. I'm also interested to see, because of the pandemic, Matt. I know summers are short around here. A lot of people, when this league launched, were wondering. A lot of people wondered, would people go indoors? Well, on the heels of the pandemic, I'm wondering if the following for the Rattlers is going to be a little more robust than it was in the first year that they were here. And I don't know the answer to that.
No, me either.
But you can. I just get the sense that people are just itching for things to do.
Yeah,
which might bode very well for the Rattlers here.
It's going to bode very well for the Rattlers. It's going to bode very well for Husky Athletics, I think.
Yeah.
Right? And the Saskatoon Blades and all these sports teams, it's going to bode incredibly well for. So, obviously that 2019 championship weekend for the Canadian Elite Basketball game was in Saskatoon that year, and the Rattlers were able to walk away with the championship. They had an early exit from the playoff bubble last year in Ontario, and they lost their first game of the season this year, but obviously a long season to go. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be right.
Yeah, it'll be great.
I had some things going on in 2019, so I just wasn't able to make it out to a Rattlers game that year. So I still technically haven't been to a Saskatchewan Rattlers game. No, I just 2019.
Very good.
I just wanted to. I had an opportunity and just never could quite find the right time to do it. So hopefully in 2021 we can get me out to a Rattlers game.
No, for sure,
because that's going to be one heck of an experience, I think. So. The MLB, Major League Baseball, cracking down, and this has just been an absolute gong show. So the backstory for those of you who don't know, they're trying to crack down on pitchers using illegal foreign substances, sticky substances. That's basically what they're calling them. And now what the idea behind it is that it allows pitchers to get a better grip on the baseball, right? So what a lot of people will do, what a lot of pitchers will do, they'll keep it on the cap, so they'll touch their ball cap every time, or on the inside of the palm of their glove, so they'll rub the palm of their glove or maybe even their belt, and it's gotten out of hand, allegedly. So the MLB's commissioner office and Rob Manfred has determined that the umpires will be checking the pitchers after every inning, and also if an opposing team's manager thinks that the pitcher is using a sticky substance, he can allow the the umpires rather, to check that. So there's a story that goes with that, but this just seems like a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction to me from the commissioner's office.
Well, the one thing about baseball, there's two things they want. They want offense, and they want games to move.
Yep.
That's and as much pride as a pitcher takes in throwing a no-hitter, fans don't want to watch. It's just like football, right?
You don't want to watch a 10-3 game.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And that's kind of what it is. So they want the ball in play, and there's been some conversation about batters being able to see the laces, out of the pitcher's hand.
Yep.
And so Major League Baseball, as you mentioned, has tried to crack down on this, because if the laces aren't moving, in a circular motion, if the ball's coming at you with no movement, then the ball's all over the place. Hitters don't like that, and it is illegal. Has been forever. So last Wednesday, this came to a head when Phillies manager Joe Girardi apparently asked the umpires to check Washington's Max Scherzer repeatedly, and it finally came to a head in the fourth inning of the ball game when Scherzer threatened to actually strip down on the mound in front of everybody. Right, and so. You made a good point to me. You had the best point on this with regards to, okay, you know what? You can check within, reality.
Yeah.
But, eventually what Girardi did was not cool, to a point where it was holding up the game.
Yeah.
And he was just doing it to antagonize Scherzer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and it wasn't me that had that idea. I know where you're going with that. It was actually Clayton Kershaw, pitcher for the LA Dodgers, that said, okay, yeah, but how about if the team whose manager checks the opposing pitcher and say that opposing pitcher doesn't have anything? Well, then that team should be penalized in one way or another. And we do see it in other leagues, right?
Yep.
In the National Football League, if you challenge a call and the challenge doesn't get overturned, the play stands, well, then you lose a timeout. Same thing with the NHL. If you make a challenge and you lose that challenge, well, then your team has to sit and the other team gets a 2-minute power play, right? So I don't know how in baseball you would necessarily make that work, but it is a good point by Clayton Kershaw.
Yeah.
Because you're exactly right? The MLB, one of the things, especially in the past couple of years, one of the things, one of the big things for the MLB has been pace of play, right? And there's been talk of them losing fans, losing interest because baseball games were simply just taking too long, longer than they should have. So then they brought in, well, you're only allowed to have X amount of mound visits in a game and this and that. And now the pitchers are on a time count and stuff like that, right? So if you're going to be an umpire and, every inning you're going to have to check a pitcher for a foreign substance, well, I can totally see where Clayton Kershaw is coming from there. But yeah, Max Scherzer was none too pleased about that situation.
No, he was not.
But it was an interesting, and we actually had our first player get caught using a foreign substance. Sergio Romero, a pitcher from the Seattle Mariners, got caught. So it'll be interesting to see if he actually gets that 10-game suspension. That is a penalty for using a foreign substance or not. And this is the perfect opportunity to remind you that it is a 10-game suspension if you get caught using a sticky substance. However, you can do whatever you want in the World Series and not get anything.
What happened to the old days where a guy like Gaylord Perry, like from 40 years ago, used to hide Vaseline like in the loop of his belt or whatever, and they couldn't find it. And it used to be a game to see if they could find it or not. Or, and he would openly admit, but they'll never find it on me. They don't know where it is, right? So, I mean, we've come a long way with regards to that, for sure.
We do have one more comment on the Saskatchewan Roughriders before we wrap up. And that is from Joe. He's interested to see how player development has been affected through the pandemic. Wonder if players were able to evolve their game in the midst of all the madness. That's not necessarily a Saskatchewan Roughriders thing. That could be for anything, but it's a heck of a point.
Well, it is.
Joe.
And I think it's going to be the same for every team.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure the football that we're going to see come August the 5th or 6th, whatever.
Or the hockey or the anything.
I'm not sure it's going to be, with no preseason games are they having one? I think they might be having one or maybe none. But there isn't going to be the extended camp. So the product you see in the first week, it's not that it's not going to be exciting because sometimes mistakes can lead to excitement. But I'm not sure it's going to be the caliber of football we're normally used to in week one of a CFL season.
Right. The national anthem, of course, is being played right now for the game one of the Stanley Cup Final. So that means that we got to get out of here. You got to get home and watch your Montreal Canadiens lose to the Tampa Bay Lightning. I will allow you to do that. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the YXE Sports Podcast. Next week, even though the Canada Day holiday itself lands on a Thursday, we will not be having a show. And the week after that, the weekend before that, I have a bachelor party, and I'm just going to be in no condition to do this on the Monday. All right. So I'm going to take the next 2 weeks off.
Honest.
Exactly. Right. I'm going to take the next 2 weeks off, and then we'll see you sometime towards the middle or the end of July. That wraps up things for this week's episode of the YXE Sports Podcast. Go Lightning or Canadians. I know. Having a Canadian team win the Stanley Cup Final would be very cool. But enjoy the game tonight and enjoy the entire Stanley Cup Final.